So we're moving to the next session, which is going to cover kind of a completely different side of the house, the investment side of the house. And I am very pleased and honored to be introducing Rudina Seseri. She is founder and managing partner at Glasswing Ventures, leading the firm's investments in AI, enabled enterprise software as a service, cloud information technology, IT software, and vertical markets. Rudina has many, many accomplishments. It comes after 19 years of investing and operational experience in high-growth companies in IT software, cloud enterprise SaaS. Before venture capital, she was a senior manager in the corporate development group at Microsoft, where she led a number of successful transactions and investments. What I found interesting in a much longer bio that I'll let you read at your own time, Rudina was appointed by the Dean of the Harvard Business School for 4 consecutive years to serve as the entrepreneur in residence in the business school, and was named the HBS inaugural group of Rock Venture Capital Partners. Most recently, she was appointed to faculty and staff at Harvard Business School as an executive fellow. She's been honored and named by many magazines, 40 under 40, top 100, women, entrepreneurs, etc. I'm eager to get to the questions. I'll just mention that she graduated magna cum laude from Wellesley College with a BA in economics and international relations, and holds an MBA from HBS. With that, maybe I'll start by welcoming Rudina and asking my first question. So, as an investor, what's your perspective on the generative AI wave? It showed up all of a sudden. It surprised many of us. Was it on the investors' community's radar, or was it a surprise? And did it change kind of your investment thesis and philosophy?
So thank you for having me. Accolades don't matter. Dollars in, dollars out, just saying. So we wasted a bunch of time there. But so fundamentally, Gen AI feels like it emerged overnight, not because it did emerge overnight, because it got mass consumerized overnight. And what I mean by that statement is the fact that applications such as ChatGPT, grandmother can work with it and say, oh my God, it sounds like a human, and your 10-year-old can cheat on their homework and use it to cut corners, right? So when you have that kind of appeal that's so broad, overnight everyone becomes aware. So that's one piece. The second piece is the fact that the investment community, particularly my brethren in venture capital, we are facing a recessionary environment, and a lot of the firms that bet in crypto have been facing a pretty painful, winter. So when you account for those two facets, and then the actual power of Gen AI and what it can do, it's natural, albeit somewhat euphemistic, that you see a flocking to the space by all the venture capitalists. So second part of your question, does that make sense, first of all?
Yeah. So the question is, what changes did it make in your life as an investor?
Well, it's a lot noisier. And all of a sudden, shiny wrappers using Gen AI became moats, but not. So what it did is it created a lot of noise around the market, where XYZ company, a run-of-the-mill software company, throws a sort of Gen AI UI UX capability. Therefore, you don't, if you previously were using PyTorch, now you can use plain English, and therefore they're an AI company. And what I remind many of us is like saying, hi, I'm on the web, therefore I'm a viable business. It would be a joke if someone said that today, but that's effectively what a lot of companies are saying. And we, for the last 12 months, have had a oversupply of capital in those types of bets. In case you have any questions, I'm going to say that we're better than most, so let me just lead with that. But fundamentally, for us, how we evaluate investment opportunities is very, very different. Whether it's Gen AI, which is extremely transformative and powerful, don't get me wrong, but it's only one narrow facet of, I'll use ML as the proxy for the how of AI. It's really, you're using the embeddings from feed forward, and you're using the attention type architectures. Very powerful combination, fully transformative, don't get me wrong. But you have tons and tons of other architectures, tons and tons of other techniques, and then ensemble methods and combinations that can give you a lot more power. So AI is a lot broader than Gen AI 1. 2, I am looking for a moat within the investments that I make, which is core to the algorithm itself, rather than lipstick on the cover alone. Without that lipstick, you can't get anywhere at this point, but you need to have more than just that. So let me give you an example to sort of bring it alive. So I have a company out of Toronto called Base2.ai. Process manufacturing for anything involving compounds. What they do is they effectively are using recurrent neural net type architectures and pins more specifically for a technique, physics-informed neural nets, so that they can incorporate within the algorithm the boundaries, the physical, real-world boundaries of a formulaic anything, compound, drug, chemical, what have you. The output being that with high specificity how to optimize the production. So you don't have to run it to the maximum, tens of millions of dollars. You know exactly what specifications to run. And by the way, you actually get more accuracy, because from batch to batch and production to production, like if you're taking vitamins, let's just hope we're not taking too many other medications, not 2 batches are identical, so it improves that. Now, do they use Gen AI? Absolutely. The process engineer can use plain English, but that's not the differentiation. The differentiation is what they have at the core, which is a whole sort of landscape changing play.
So a related question to the lipstick on the proverbial animal. So how is AI popping up as an enabler or threat in the business models of startups that are not in AI? What I keep hearing from a lot of startups and a lot of VCs is VCs are basically ignoring any pitch that doesn't have AI in it. How true is this, and how do you see AI popping up in these companies that are not AI companies fundamentally?
So retrofitting is not easy, right? So retrofitting AI is not easy because fundamentally your software and the algorithms have not been set up to ingest all the data, get trained on that data, and sort of get the improvements on the output. But I do want to start by saying, AI companies, for the sake of AI companies, don't lead anywhere. There are plenty. So I focus purely for the last 19 plus years now, in B2B software, and since 2010 in the application of AI. There are plenty of opportunities to big, large technology companies that are not AI native. And that goes counter to my existence and my business, but we got to be honest about the reality of where we are. Now, with that as the backdrop, fundamentally, if I were building a business today, for sure, Gen AI you'd have to incorporate. Again, does it make you an AI company? I beg to differ, but whatever you want to call yourself. Because the interface expectations, the user experience expectations have changed. Again, I give you the web, maybe I'm dating myself, but if you weren't on the web today and you had a digital or wanted to reach out folks, you have to have a digital channel. It's kind of like that. But then fundamentally, AI has to give you a differentiated and protectable moat for the problem you are solving. So in the example that I gave you, without AI, you couldn't render the models. You couldn't, therefore, project with high precision what the output ought to be. It's got to be that kind of play. Otherwise, it's AI for the sake of AI. So it is interesting. I will come at it from the end of the funnel when it comes to exits. I talk to bankers all the time, and one banker recently made a comment that they had three companies, large investment bank. They had three companies that they were transacting, and all transactions got put on hold because the acquirers wanted to figure out how AI was going to disrupt the businesses that they were acquiring. So there's definitely a real fear, and I think we should take it seriously. I think with the amount of data and the algorithms available, it can be transformative, but I think there is room for both.
Yeah. So I love the fact that you used an example before, because that's what people remember, stories. So do you have examples, or at least a story of a startup? So I know at the end of the funnel, at the exit time, people are asking these questions, with nervousness. But do you have any examples where a startup had to do a major pivot because generative AI showed up all of a sudden? They didn't have a story for it, and there was a disruption to the model, so they had to do the pivot. And the second part of my question in that story is, how patient are VCs when these pivots have to happen?
So I don't have a company that had to have a pivot because Gen AI came about, because my first Gen AI investment for calibration was in December 2018. Just putting it out there. So, again, separate noise from substance and the reality I've been living in. But startups pivot all the bloody time. Sometimes they pivot from board meeting to board meeting, from quarter to quarter. Now, those are tiny pivots, and then there are pivots. So I have, you not so subtly asked that I give an example. So I have a portfolio company that is incredibly deep tech, and what they have done is, by using object storage technology to render a new type of database, they actually are separating storage from compute. So now you can query humongous amounts of data, like terabytes per fractions of a second, at a fractional of the cost, because you can do it in any cloud and you can do it in cold storage. You don't have to move it to hot storage. So put plainly 80% savings in cost. Great, Gen AI comes about. So think of them very much as a middle layer, and they were trying to go to the application layer and have an end sort of user experience at the app layer. The challenge with that is that when you are a middle layer type of company, it's incredibly complex what they do, and we were struggling. We were struggling to get to the end of the customers, because the feature requirements per each customers felt as though you were developing a unique app for each of them that's neither sustainable nor scalable nor doable by a startup, even a well-funded one such as this. So what they honed in on though, and I would very much call that a pivot or an extension at a minimum, was the fact that because of the technology that they were leveraging, when it came to Gen AI, when you're pointing to the data, you really didn't need all the vector databases, and you could get around all the cybersecurity and risks. There was some discussion previously about that in the prior panel, because they could extract the schema of the data, and therefore the model did not have to look at the data and get into your proprietary information. They could just look at the schema. That kind of landed on them. I mean, could I have told you in 2018 when I invested in them? No. So some of these things you have to be able to respond to the market. Pivots, some are good, but oftentimes their response is something that's not working. And keep in mind, most of the startups, chances of failure are 99%, so it requires quite a hustle, quite a vision, and it's much less about the idea. In our industry, in an innovation world, both venture and startups, we praise so-and-so who had an amazing idea. Honestly, I have 10 good ideas a day myself. The question is, how many of those can I execute? I'd love a good idea and execution, but at the end of the day, it's about that ruthless focus, execution, ability to listen to what's not working, internalize, not let it crush you, get up the next morning and go for it. So being a bit of a torpedo.
So very brief follow-up on this one before I actually shift gears to that other category. Are VCs getting more patient, less patient, or the same when it comes to a company, a portfolio company needing to do a pivot?
It's a tricky question, even though you don't intend it as such. Listen, I go in, I'm the first capital in most of the time, so think of it as the first $2 million that, out of 4 or out of 2. And our mantra is we go early and we go long. And what I mean by we go long, we participate in the A, we participate in the B, we participate in the C. So it's not as if here's a little bit of dollars, now I'll move on to the next flower in the field. It's actually we take board seats, it's a lot of work. So by virtue of that, it means that in any given company, I or my partners will be in that board probably for a solid 5 to 15 years, longer than some marriages. So, that is being pretty damn patient. However, there is patience and then there is being irresponsible, and that's where it gets tricky. I've had very few founders who at some point down the road, they say, we've tried everything, let's land this baby, get our money back, get the portion of our money. Because by virtue of, again, you wake up one morning and say, I'm going to go against 99% odds of failure, and I'm going to be the one that outdoes them. So it's that kind of personality and vision when you're so deep into it, and the company is truly your baby, I'll come back to that point, it's very hard to be aware and say, we've tried 5 pivots, we've tried fundraising, we've used this, this dog doesn't hunt. So at some point, one has to have that conversation. And if you hear VCs that are absolutely saying, we never do that, they're being untruthful. We have to do that. And I'll tell you why we have to do that. The capital that we get, yes, we have the rich girls and the rich guys' money and we're making them richer, but we also have pension funds. It's like teachers' pension funds, and what we do with that capital that we invest, basically contributes positively or negatively as to whether these retirees get paid. We have endowments. Think about what's going on. So the accountability is not just, oh, my VC didn't love me in the third, go at it. It's you're accountable to the folks that have entrusted you with their capital, and that oftentimes gets lost in the big sort of buzz situation. But fundamentally, 1 tweak, 2 pivots, 3 pivots don't faze me. I'm worried if we don't do that because it's telling me that we're not listening to the market closely.
Yeah. What role do you see for, and this is shifting gears now, what role do you see for academia? And I know we've discussed this before multiple times, sometimes actually pushed by you. What role do you see for academia in fostering industry innovation and becoming more active in the startup and investment ecosystem?
So it's been interesting, right? Because there's always been this dynamic where industry has always wanted to be at the cutting edge of what academia is doing and has attempted that. There have been models, the Media Lab in a sister institution in this town kind of does that. You are doing a lot of that here since taking over. So there is that industry to academia, and then there is the academia innovation or breakthroughs that try to make its way in industry. And yet, historically, this, if I called it a market, leave it to VC to take a non-for-profit effort and call it a market. But, the market hasn't fully cleared. I think we have a couple of unique opportunities in this moment in time and one fundamental threat. The opportunities are that never, ever, ever in my career have I seen innovation from a research paper or a postdoc to someone adopting it in industry than here. I mean, sometimes it's a matter of weeks. It's like, oh my God, wait, I gotta read this because so-and-so said they're using it. Never ever have we seen that. So it's become very, very concrete in that regard. And it's an opportunity for academia to really get embedded. Furthermore, sort of industry, they have the data, they have sort of the the market position, they're trying to figure out. So you have two willing participants. I think if there was a little bit more of a commercial mindset on the academic part and more of a tolerance for the academic piece, because the academic piece is when I talk about like AI companies and founders, I said you have the go-to-market, typically the CEO, you have the CTO who can just get that MVP out the door, and then you have the ML lead, whatever name you give him or her, who's a perfectionist. So they're doing this in the lab, and now you're telling them, oh, don't worry, 50% is good enough, let's get it out, right? And it's like, whoa, my integrity. So if we can get over those language and cultural differences, we will make a very, very significant dent. The one threat is that especially the large incumbents in tech have effectively become academic institutions. If you look at, I think isn't it Stanford? I think it's Stanford who does the annual State of AI, and
yes.
What they really check is where are the papers coming through, et cetera. And it's fascinating to watch because industry has been outweighing academia, at least in earlier this year when that report came out. That's pretty disconcerting, right? And then secondly, there is also a geopolitical dynamic between China and the US and what's happening. So I think that's something that we need to figure out what's the role of academia in this space going forward, and is it to continue pushing papers out, or maybe are we papers that is 10 to 20 years from now? So we're a bit in flux, I think, in that regard.
Okay. I have so many questions for you, but I also want to go to the audience and online and get questions. So as the microphones make it to the first question, I'll ask you my last question.
Okay.
What advice would you have for a startup pitching you when it comes to how they leverage and use AI in this very noisy and rapidly evolving landscape?
So if you're using Gen AI to improve your go-to-market, beautiful. Check that box. Tell me you've done it. If you're using Microsoft Copilot for coding, excellent. You're using the latest and the greatest, well done. Now tell me what you're doing for your business and what you're building. Get very, very quickly to your techniques, to your differentiation. How do you have if you have an algorithmic mode, great. If you have a data mode, great. If you have both, ideal. But, and if you don't know, just say you don't know. Chances of a founder getting a second meeting with someone on our team because they said they don't know are much higher than someone we all fake it till we make it in life to varying degrees. But if pattern recognition, I don't even have to be smart. I see so many of these. At some point, I know when someone is hand waving it. So that I don't know. And then the next question is, how do you think you're going to go about finding out the answer?
So is that the Glasswing? You can detect who's winging it? No, I'm kidding. Yes. Yeah, please. Question.
Sure.
Hey, hi, Rudina. Lovely answers. One question was, when you are actually looking at companies, according to you, which sector has shown you the greatest promise in terms of incorporating AI in general and Gen AI in particular? Which sector?
So AI and Gen AI right now are being used interchangeably. And to give you some data, 50% of enterprises right now have some sort of AI project going. To the best of my knowledge, there is no consistency. Like, it's not as if all dev teams are using AI, but pretty much across industry, about half of the enterprises are using AI. Kyle Dolce, are you here? Nope. Oh, Kyle, which industry has the highest adoption? You have my data. Yeah. That's my chief of staff and Northeastern alum here, Kyle Dolce.
Sales and marketing players have the highest.
No, by industry, Kyle. I have it by and market. So sales and market, anything that's go-to-market because of Gen AI, they have it. I think financial services is pretty high up there. He's going to look it up. We have it actually sector by sector. So they're pretty high up. Healthcare has been a tough cookie to crack, in large part because of how the industry is set up, not necessarily because of HIPAA, which you'd think it's because of the compliance, but diagnostics have been a very, like anything around machine detection, MRI. If if you're doing any kind of scanning, look at when you get the report. It will say a doctor and machine reviewed this. So this is co-piloting in action right there. So those have been, but I think I would say financial services, supply chain, because a lot of old school data, but a lot of data, they're stuck in the 1980s. They can actually almost more easily make the jump rather than cutting edge cloud-based type plays because they've invested so much in that current generation. But yep, go ahead.
You have to repeat that for the online.
So transportation, travel I'm sorry? Retail always at the frontier. Think about, what happened with digital. Anything around, marketing, digital marketing. Retail is always at the frontier. Automotive? Yep. So I copy. He's the smarter one. Don't talk to me.
Okay. Next question, please.
Thank you. Hi, Rudina. Nice to meet you, and
Likewise.
thank you for your presentation. A few weeks ago, I was part of a panel in Haas Business School at UC Berkeley, and we're discussing ethics in AI with the business community. And some entrepreneurs came after the panel to discuss a little bit because they felt that ethical AI applies to big companies, but startups and entrepreneurs do not have enough resources to get enough multi-stakeholders in the discussion, or to have independent oversight, or to conduct impact evaluation of their models. So part of what they were requesting or asking was if the investor community would be willing to put additional money so that they would have enough resources to hire the expertise that they need, and maybe in their small teams they do not have. So I wanted to pick your brain on that.
Yeah. So let me tackle that question, just structuring my thoughts, in three ways. Where does bias emerge from, and then what can we do about it? So bias, point one, emerges from models, right? So one of the things that you have to figure out is who's building the models. If it's uniform, I don't care if it's all women or all men or all white, whatever, the structure of those models, and largely sort of unawareness rather than purposefully bad, comes from that. So one thing startups can and do is hire diverse development teams. And I will not hear it that there are not enough women doing that. It's not true. So that's one. Secondly, and I think in my humble opinion, way more problematically, is the data set. Listen, if you are a lender, and you have historically denied single, Latina, black, white mom, whatever, a mortgage, so will the machine. It is not the technology's fault. The technology is inherently neither good nor bad. It's because of the data. So then oversight on the data that you choose to use is really, really, really important. So when it comes to startup, if you can't afford the person, you get to tools. But also, I think breakthroughs back to the academia point. For example, I think it was in February of this year that a new technique around vision, so this applies more to language or to models rather than data, but called Milan. There was a paper that basically now we have a much better understanding of, for vision in particular, how the nodes within neural nets are working. That gets to explainability, and explainability can get you to improvement in ethics. Same with data, knowing, have a human in the loop. If the machine is denying, have a human in the loop. But thirdly, in typical, VC tech fashion, let's build for it. So at Glasswing, we have incubated a business called Flux, which is in stealth mode, but fundamentally tackles the very issue of compliance, data, transparency, and avoidance of bias. So, doing good doesn't mean that it has to be charitable. You can do well, and you can do good. So we've actually put dollars not in a spend to support this nice non-for-profit, but there is a business to be had. And it's very analogous from a pattern recognition to what we did when security issues first emerged with a company called resilient security systems, which ultimately became IBM's security arm, but with incident response, where humans were saying, I don't have enough people when I get hacked, my customer data, how do I notify them? Well, you can model that and you can build that. So that's my answer.
Okay, last two questions. Please, brief.
Sorry, my answer's so long.
No,
No, that's okay.
So, Rudina, thank you for the pragmatic responses. When you look at North America market versus Europe market, especially with legal and regulatory differences that exist and significance of legal and regulatory concerns that exist in Europe, how are you seeing investments being made in startups or using those two different marketplaces as potential commercialization?
Yep. So in my business, it's important to know what you know and what you don't know. I do not invest in Europe. Therefore, take what I say with a very grain of salt and very much discounted. But fundamentally, I'm going to come up to the 30,000-foot level. It comes down to the question, should AI be regulated and therefore is Europe leading? Or should it be unregulated and therefore Europe is shooting itself in the foot? And in fact, if I can add to your question, and if we look at it as a continuum, we have China, US, and then Europe, in that spectrum. I fundamentally believe that AI should be regulated. I repeat, AI is neither good nor bad, but it's very powerful. So if you think about regulation, particularly around privacy, data, and what it is being used for, it is my view that Europe is leading the way in that regard, not too differently than what occurred with GDPR. Now, it's been very interesting because GDPR happened in Europe and we've yet to see it in full force in the US, but because companies are global in nature, we have to accept, or whatever choice we want to make, they just implemented it globally. So in many ways, they did set the center for a global adoption, albeit that it got delayed many years, many times over. What's interesting now around AI is look at the regulations in the state of New York. Pretty aggressive and getting implemented. California has always been that way. And also, the regulatory bodies are always slow to respond because tech moves faster and would be moving at not only faster, but at an accelerating pace. Having said that, if you compare Congress, and I won't weigh in on its efficiency, but the knowledge around AI and awareness today versus when they were doing, what felt like calling IT support in questioning Zuckerberg, day and night. I mean, they've come up the curve. So my expectation is that we mirror Europe, but probably to a softer and lower extent. So I don't invest in Europe.
There's many more questions. I'm told it's a very hard cut here on
time.
Oh,
but Adam is my buddy, so he gets to ask. Sorry.
I'll ask the question, but she doesn't need to answer it.
Okay, what's the question?
It's an impossible question.
Make it look good.
I don't know. I think it's impossible to ask, but essentially, do you have advice for people, either in enterprise or starting up companies, where you could sort of look for the problems that are the most ideal canonical examples that AI could solve? Repeatable, wasted manual resources.
I will give you the criteria for when I look at a company, not the usual founders, but like as it pertains to AI.
10 seconds, Rudina.
Does it solve a big problem, and whose big problem? If it's the intern's big problem, I could give a damn. If it is the huge department, huge pain point, great. Can we explain it, like the errors? Can we explain the output? Ties a bit to explainability, but sort of errors and measures. Does it fit in the workflow? If you're more efficient with your workflow today, AI might improve you, but if it's outside your workflow, it's not going to get there. Is it core to the product, or can it be done with the run-of-the-mill software? And does the totality of it hold in combination to be protectable and differentiated?
Okay. On that note, please join me in thanking Rudina for a great session.